2023 saw yet another bowl game and another successful season for the Georgia State Panthers, yet 2024 is going to be very, very different. Tons of major contributors are gone. There is an overturn at the head coaching position, and for Georgia State, there is not much expected out of this Panther program this season. However, can they overcome those expectations, overcome their losses, and hey, be a little bit of surprise out of the Sun Belt here in 2024? Get back to a bowl game? You're about to find out what I think here in this video. What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today, and I want to welcome you to my channel. Welcome you to prediction season, which is sadly almost over. If this is the first video of mine you're watching, please, first of all, just thank you so much for watching this video. It helps support the channel in more ways than you can even imagine. But you got to go back and watch my other videos as well. You want to be as informed as possible, because if you're as big of a college football nerd as I am, you're going to want to hear what I have to say during the college football season, which means you got to subscribe, you got to ring the bell. I'm going to be posting a lot of videos during the season, and you're going to want to hear what I have to say. But hey, you can help support the channel in just more ways than that. Of course, watching and subscribing are the biggest ways, but you can also like, you can comment, you can share, you can do pretty much anything to interact with the channel. It all helps support what I do here on YouTube, and I really appreciate the support that I've gotten so far. And after a water break, make sure y'all stay hydrated. We are now going to be talking about the Georgia State Panthers. Hey, how do we do predictions around here? Well, I'm glad you asked. We'll take a deep dive into the team's offense, into the team's defense, and at the end of the video, we'll go through the team's football schedule and give it a game-by-game preview and prediction. Before we talk about the Georgia State Panthers, a couple more things, because right over here will be the stats the team put up, either offensively or defensively, from last season. And of course, for your viewing pleasure, right below the team's logo, I went ahead and put the team's coaching staff for you. Del McGee is the new head coach, taking over for Sean Elliott, who is now left to take an assistant job over with, I believe it is the South Carolina Gamecocks. So Del McGee is the new head coach, and let's dive on into talking about this offense here, which, overall had its ups and downs, but, you can't complain from what you got out of this offense last year. Yes, it didn't break the 400 yards per game mark, but it didn't really have to. The rush game was pretty good. The passing game, while it definitely could have seen improvement statistically, overall, you got some solid quarterback play out of this guy that I'm about to talk about in Darren Granger. Boy, was he a really good player throughout his time at Georgia State. Last season, 2,621 yards, 20 touchdowns and 7 interceptions, was also the team's second leading rusher, had 736 yards and 10 rushing touchdowns. Darren Granger throughout his Panther career was really, really good, and that year by far was his best season. Now, you can go back to 2021 where he had a 19-4 touchdown to interception ratio, things like that, but overall, 2023, I should say, was his best season. He set career highs in passing touchdowns, career high in passing yards, and I believe a career high in rushing yards. I'm going to fact check that. Yes, it actually was a career high in rushing yards by 2. Career high in rushing touchdowns. You couldn't have asked for much better from Darren Granger last year, so you do lose him. He's gone due to graduation, and Michele Colasurdo, hopefully I'm saying that name right, he was the other quarterback, the only other quarterback to throw a pass for the Panthers last year, 5 of 8 for 47 yards. He has gone through the transfer portal, so it's a completely revamped quarterback room. You bring in Zach Gibson over from Georgia Tech, DJ Riles over from Middle Tennessee, and Christian, not Christina, that typing fingers over here, Christian Velu. There probably is a Christina Velu out there somewhere that I'm not aware of, but Christian Velu is a Pitt transfer that comes over here and is going to try to help this offense out as well. Now, all 3 of those guys, again, new to this program, coming over from various different directions, and I think Zach Gibson is going to be the guy to get the starting job. Not only does he have quite a bit of playing experience under his belt, he also has some starting experience under his belt. Christian Velu, Velu, however you pronounce that last name. I apologize for mispronunciations. I believe it started a couple games at Pitt. DJ Riles was thrown in here and there at the Middle Tennessee, but of course sat behind Nick Vattiato once he eventually got that role. But Zach Gibson is the guy that I think is going to lead this offense. He didn't really have much statistics last year. This is back in 2022, 589 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks. But you go back to 2021, 1,262 yards and 157 pass attempts. That's a 69.4 completion percentage for him there as he went 109 for 157 and 10 touchdowns, no picks. That's the Zach Gibson that you want right here for Georgia State. We'll see if they get it here in 2024. Running back room, you lose another absolutely vital piece to this offense, a 1,300-yard rusher from last season. It's Marcus Carroll, 1,350 yards and 13 touchdowns on 274 carries, hovering right around the 5-yard per carry mark. You're going to be losing him, as well as KZ Adams, both of which off through the portal. Marcus Carroll now off to Missouri. So when you talk about the running back room, yeah, you do get Freddie Brock back, had 307 yards in the touchdown for you last year on only 30 carries. All you math nerds, you know that's more than 10 yards per carry from last season, but a ton of transfers come in from all different directions. CJ Beasley is in. Savion Wilkerson is over from Colorado. Michelle Dukes, Jordan Ford. All of those guys are going to be coming in here to play for this team, and I'll tell you where the other guys are from there as well. Jordan Ford is over from Tulsa. You get CJ Beasley over from Coastal Carolina. Michael Dukes is in from South Florida, and a guy that I didn't even mention, Dominic Thomas, is a Clemson transfer. So you get a ton of talent coming in through the portal. How all those guys mesh together, well, it's going to be really interesting to see here. Wide receiver and tight end room, not many losses in terms of quantity, but you do lose a couple really good players in quality out of the wide receiver room, and that is both Robert Lewis and Jakari Carter. I'll tell you where they stood in things last year, but Robert Lewis was actually the team's leading receiver last year. 877 yards, 7 touchdowns, one of those a 97-yard touchdown, and 70 catches for him last season. And Jakari Carter, team's third leading receiver, 276 yards. Sadly, no touchdowns for him. That'll change wherever he's off to. He's now off and gone through the portal. And again, no notable losses out of the tight end room. So we talk about what this team returns and brings in through the portal in the wide receiver room. Well, you still get Tailgate Williams coming back. Second leading receiver, had 615 yards and 6 touchdowns for you last season. Kadarius Thompson also returns, as well as Josias Krettel. Hopefully I'm saying that name right. Peter Kikwada and Raheem Laney, as well as some other pieces you could mention, and a piece from the transfer portal and a guy by the name of Yusuf Terry, and we'll tell you where he's coming from here in just one second, but Yusuf Terry probably going to end up playing a pretty vital role here. He's a South Florida transfer, also coming over from the Baylor Bears, where he was before he went to South Florida. So a mix of experience for him. He should give a boost to this wide receiver room. Again, I said no notable losses out of the tight end room, so you do return all these names from last season. Amon Green is back. Chris Bird and Avion McBride are all names that you'll see here. Amon Green being the leader of those, 147 yards and 4 touchdowns for him last season. Now on to the offensive line. Avery Reese and Travis Glover are gone due to graduation, and Montavious Cunningham, really good offensive lineman, and Cameron Dye are both gone through the portal. So here's what your offensive line room looks like in 2024. Trevor Timmons, Ben Chukwuma, Alec Johnson, Lamar Robinson, and Mason Cook all return to the offensive line room. Couple that with a pair of transfers, Kyrick Mason and Joshua Black. I think those are the 7 guys that'll be fighting for starting positions on the offensive line. When you go and you take a look at this offense compared to last season into this year, you still got a lot of really nice talent. Now, the wide receiver room loses some very big pieces here, but you get a ton of transfers into this running back room. And I honestly couldn't sit here and tell you who I think is going to be the lead back. Could it be CJ Beasley? Yeah. Could it be Savion Wilkerson? Absolutely. Could it be Dukes or Ford? Maybe a little more unlikely, but absolutely. Freddie Brock could step in there. That Clemson transfer that I mentioned earlier, he could be that starting back this year. There's just a lot of things that I think have to fit in place for Georgia State this year, on top of having a new coaching scheme with Del McGee and a ton of transfers. It's going to make for a very interesting season here for the Georgia State Panther offense that I think regresses in 2024, but I don't think regresses as much as you may think. But now we got to flip over the slide here, once it does change. There we go. And talk about this defense, which was the weak point of this team last year, especially in that secondary. Look, they had some really good players in the secondary. They just were not able to put it together. They allowed almost 280 passing yards per game last season. The third down defense wasn't great, and even the rush defense at times just was not the best. They allowed over 30 points per game. And look, even though this team made a bowl game last year, you go take a look at the back half of that schedule. The defense allowed way too many points way too often. Another water break. Must be really thirsty today. Okay, apologies for that delay. Let's now dive in to tell you what they're losing off the defensive side, including some really important pieces here on the defensive front, which is what we usually start out with. Oh, and a guy that's gone and off to the NFL out of the linebacker room. We'll get there when we get there. Javon Dennis, Tylen Dunlap, Corey Warren, and Ricardo Williams. All names that you're going to see leaving this defensive front off of the 2023 team. Dennis led the team in sacks last year. He had 31 tackles to couple along with 5 sacks. And the other guys, well, they were able to play here and there, provide some solid minutes when they did get in. I don't think any of them got a sack. Oh, no, I am wrong on that. Warren had half a sack last year. And then Dunlap had a sack last season as well. But all those guys, anywhere from 12 tackles or lower on the tackling leaderboard. So all important pieces, obviously Javon Dennis, that biggest piece. It's just some depth that you do lose. Okay, so who do you return here? Well, you are going to be returning your leading tackler on the defensive line from last season, 36 tackles and 3 sacks from Henry Bryant last season. You also do get Anthony Bloom and Fuchez Lewis that is coming back to this team as well. And again, hopefully I've said that name right. If I didn't, my sincerest apologies. Bloom, defensive interior, 25 tackles, 2 sacks for him last year, as well as a couple transfers here. KD McDaniel and Victwan Brown. Hopefully I'm saying that name correctly. Both of those guys are going to be coming in here through the transfer portal. That's pretty much your entire 2 deep right there. Yes, you could also list a couple of the other names, and again, technically not a full 2 deep because while they play 3 defensive linemen, I listed only 5. There just got to be some pieces that step up big time in the depth department because you lost a lot of your depth through the portal last season. Linebacking room, this is the guy that I was telling you about. That's a really good player off to the NFL. Your leading tackler from last season, it's John Trey Hunter. I would have flipped the 2 numbers there. 95 tackles, sack and a half, 4 passes defended. Really, really good defensive player, and what a leader he was for this defense. You will be losing him here, again, gone to the NFL. And a couple other guys have graduated. Jordan Veneziale, again, hopefully saying that name right, and Shamar McCullum, both gone due to graduation, and Jordan Jones is gone and off through the transfer portal. Veneziale was a top 5 tackler with 54 tackles last season. McCullum, pretty big piece here as well, 30 tackles and a sack for him. Veneziale had a sack in there as well. And then Jordan Jones, 13 tackles, sack and a half for him last season. You dive on into the linebacking room and what they have coming back. Well, Justin Abraham is back at 82 tackles with 3.5 sacks. So he definitely is in contention to be that leading tackler this season. Josiah Robinson, Kevin Swint, Chris Davis Jr., and Tavian Brown, as well as Javen Hall through the portal. All of those guys come back in the linebacking room. All those guys play outside Mike or I believe just sort of a wide linebacker slash another outside linebacker there as well. Defensive back room, again, this is the position that struggled for the Panther defense last season, but they do still lose some really good talent out of it. You do lose one of your better cornerbacks in Brykeese Brown. He is going to be gone and off through the portal. 6 pass defended, which is tied for the team lead. Did have a pick to couple along with 35 tackles. And Tony McRae is going to be gone out of the room as well. That's just a depth piece you lose. Still had 7 tackles, couple passes defended for him last season. Gone out of the safety room is Tyge Leach, a top 5 tackler as well. Tied for that team lead with pass defended with 6 last year and 71 tackles. And Jalen Tate is gone and off through the transfer portal. 13 tackles for him last year. Some pretty significant losses there. Brykeese Brown in the quarterback room, Tyge Leach in the safety room, but it's all about the talent that you have here. Cornerback room, Gavin Pringle, Isaiah Guy, and Jalen Jones are all names that come back for this team, while Kenyatta Watson is a transfer that comes in, should play some big minutes. Jeremiah Johnson, who had a really good season for this team last year, 74 tackles, 2 interceptions. By the way, Gavin Pringle had 4 interceptions last season, but as I was saying about Johnson, he does return. Cody Jones, nope, not to be confused with the Dude Perfect star, but Cody Jones is back. Ronald Cooper and Cam Marshall return, as well as a couple guys through the portal. Jaron Gilmore and Derek Maxey transfer in, and kickers are people tuna with no notable losses out of the special teams room. You get Cade Loggins back to be your punter, and Liam Rickman back to do the kicking duties for Georgia State this season. The defense has got to get better, especially in that secondary. Now, will it? Hard to say. You lost some pretty talented pieces there, but you did get a lot of production back. Pringle and Johnson, both really good ball hawking defensive backs for this team last year. The defensive front lost a lot of depth, but yet you still got a lot of talented pieces, bringing 2 really talented transfers. Linebacker room loses their leader in John Trey Hunter, but you still get Justin Abraham coming back. So again, a weird dichotomy with this defense, but again, also with as much pieces as you have coming in through the portal, as much depth guys are going to have to play a bigger role, and a new system as well. Again, going to be an interesting season to watch for the Georgia State defense. All right, moving on now to the Georgia State football schedule. here is how it shapes out. Any game at home is going to be underlined, while any game on the road is in italics. Guys, that's that slanted text. Any game you see in green is a game that I think the Panthers are going to win fairly easily. Any game in yellow should be a close competitive game, but one that I still see the Panthers being able to win. Any game in red is a loss. Let's dive on into talking about the Panther football schedule. You take a look at your first three games here to start off the season, all of them non-conference games. Two out of the three are going to be against Power 4 opponents, and you open in week one with the Georgia State, or not Georgia State, you are Georgia State, with the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Now, Georgia Tech will already have a game under its belt at this point. They would have played Florida State in Dublin, and win or lose, that's still an extra week that they're on the field. They get in-game reps, and Georgia Tech, I think, is just going to be a much better football team than Georgia State this season. Georgia Tech, a team to watch out for out of the ACC. You got a lot of really, really good pieces, especially if Haynes King can sort of find that groove and develop himself at the quarterback position. You can see this Georgia Tech offense have a much better season than they did last year, even though the offense was pretty solid. Defense has got some good pieces, and the Yellow Jackets will beat the Panthers this season. But Georgia State should be able to get the win against the Chattanooga Mocs. Now, you got to watch out for this one, though, because Chattanooga is one of FCS's better sides that's projected to be here in 2024. They're always a team that hangs around, always a team that can be pretty competitive out of the FCS ranks. So watch out for Chattanooga, Georgia State. This is my warning to you. If you are a guy out there that likes to look at things and predict FCS to FBS upsets, this very well could be one of them right here. I'm not predicting it, though. I still think Georgia State going to be able to pick up that win, but they will lose that next game against the Vanderbilt Commodores. And I know it's Vanderbilt, and yes, you get this game at home, but I don't think all the talent in the transfer portal has sort of meshed up to this point yet for the Georgia State Panthers. And look, Vanderbilt might be very well the worst team in the SEC. Now, that's no slight to the Commodores. The SEC is very talented, but Vanderbilt is very talented as well, and it still has some really good pieces. Even though they lost a lot through the portal, it's still SEC talent, and I think they're going to beat the Georgia State Panthers. I also think Georgia Southern, even after the first bye week here for the Georgia State Panthers, they are going to be beating the Panthers, are the Georgia Southern Eagles. Georgia Southern has still got some really good pieces here on this team. And even though, yes, you do lose a couple leaders here, especially that starting quarterback whose name is escaping my mind from last season is gone, you bring Dexter Williams in. You got some really good offensive line pieces transferring in. You return Jalen Smith. You return Derwin Burgess. You return Marcus Sanders. Some really good offensive pieces, and especially if Dexter Williams is going to come in this passing attack is as lethal as it was last season, well, that's going to give this Georgia State secondary hell, and I think that'll lead Georgia Southern to a win here. But after your second bye week here, your fourth straight home game, you're going to be able to get things figured out. You're going to be able to beat the Old Dominion Monarchs. Now, Old Dominion, still a team that very well could prove to be a competitive side out of the Sun Belt Conference. And if you remember last year, Old Dominion, in order to make it to a bowl game, they had to beat Georgia State in the final game of the season, and they did it in dramatic fashion. Not as high of stakes this time around. Again, we're only in week 7, but I think Georgia State is going to be able to get their revenge here. Yes, you bring Grant Wilson back, and a lot of talented transfers do come in. But I think Georgia State, especially in the early season here, are going to have a game or two where they're going to be able to find their groove, and you have to start finding some sort of a groove at home. You might not beat Georgia Southern, but maybe you try to make that game as competitive as you can possibly make it while moving into that game against Old Dominion, which any way you cut it, I do think you win. This is where things start to really go downhill for this team, though, because, yeah, you had 4 straight home games, which sure was nice and all. Now you got 4 straight road games and no bye weeks in between because you've already used up your 2 bye weeks this season. I mean, brutal. The schedule makers did Georgia State no favors here, and as much as you want to complain about it, you have to play the hand that you're dealt. They're going to lose to Marshall on the road. Cole Pennington, I don't have really any worries about him. Yes, there were times last year where he didn't look great, but they don't need him to be a savior. They need him to be much better than he was last season, and he will be. I have no doubts about Cole Pennington, revamped wide receiver room. He'll form chemistry with those guys. Marshall's still going to have a pretty solid defense. They'll be one of the better sides out of the Sun Belt Conference this year, so that's a win for the Marshall Thundering Herd. You're not going to be beating the App State Mountaineers on the road. Joey Aguilar is back, and yes, Nate Noel is gone. You still have Kanye Roberts there. Still some really good wide receiver pieces from last year's team, and defensively could prove to be one of the better defenses in the Sun Belt Conference. That's going to be a win for App State and thusly a loss for Georgia State. I even think you lose to the UConn Huskies. UConn, yes, UConn. UConn has got some really good talent, guys. If you're sleeping on the UConn Huskies, don't. Now, I didn't predict them to make a bowl game, and maybe that's me sleeping on UConn, but still a team that's going to be really solid this year. Some really talented wide receiver pieces come in, as well as Nick Evers. Again, you don't really know what you're going to get from him out of the quarterback position, coming over from Oklahoma, as well as Wisconsin, where he was most recently. He hasn't really played a whole lot collegiately, so kind of a mystery there from the quarterback position, and definitely a winnable game here for the Georgia State Panthers, but a game that I feel like they're going to lose. You bring in some really talented defensive pieces if you're the UConn Huskies as well, and I just think overall, they're going to be a little bit more talented than Georgia State. I think they're going to be able to win that game, and then you're not going to be beating James Madison on the road either. Now I know Kurt Signetti is gone, Jordan McLeod is gone, pretty much everyone else that had a big stake in that team and was a major contributor on that team last year is gone. But you're still bringing in some really talented transfers. You got a very talented group of guys that are going to be stepping up and playing some bigger roles for you here this season. You bring in Bob Chesney, who I think is one of the best head coaches to come out of the FCS ranks. Of course, he's coming over from Holy Cross. I think James Madison is going to be just fine. Well, and okay, you're out of this road stretch now. Things still don't get better for you. You got to go up against Jalen Rayner and the Arkansas State Red Wolves, a team that, again, I really, really like. I think that Arkansas State, a team to fear and watch out for in the Sun Belt Conference this season. Jalen Rayner is a budding young star, and I think he leads his team to victory on the road against Texas State. I mean, this quite simply is just a team I'm very high on, and it could prove to be one of the Sun Belt Conference's best sides here in 2024. You thought the offense was good last year. Well, yeah, James Madison lost Jordan McLeod. Texas State is getting Jordan McLeod, and no slight to what TJ Finley did last year. That is an upgrade at the quarterback position. Got some really good skill position players. The offense will be high-flying. The defense should be improved. That's a win for the Bobcats, and it'll be a win for the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers. Yes, Grayson McCall is gone, but I think Ethan Vasco going to provide you some solid quarterback play. And overall, you still got some pretty good talent there, as well as a head coach in Tim Beck that, yes, I've said before that I do not love, but he's going to be able to get the job done for you. 2-10 season for the Georgia State Panthers. Ouch. And look, I'll be honest with you, maybe I'm undervaluing what this Georgia State team does, but I just think there's a lot of change from last season. You got a lot of transfers coming in because a lot of talent does leave. A new head coaching regime when Sean Elliott left to go over to South Carolina. I just think it's a lot of change for the Panthers this year. 2-10 is what I got, but I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Remember to play hard, but tailgate harder, and we'll move on to the UMass Minutemen in my next video. Goodbye.